Parent Entrepreneur Power, conversation number 191.
Parent Entrepreneur Power.
Wait, what? It's Mama Power!
This is the podcast for parents juggling the tough choices required for success in business while putting family first. Hi, I'm Mary Catherine Johnson, and I share the ups and downs and dirty truths of profits and potty training while chatting with successful parent entrepreneurs from all walks of life. Are you powered up? Hey there, Power Parents. Welcome to the conversation. Today, I get to chat with someone I think you're going to be interested to hear from. Definitely. Depending on the time of year you're listening to this, you can always get this information. But I get to welcome to the conversation Diane Gardner. She is a tax superhero. How's that sound? Hey there, Diane. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mary Catherine, thanks so much for having me on your program today.
You are so welcome. Thanks for coming and chatting with us and sharing your superhero powers. So tell me, all right, we start in the same place with everyone. Tell me your once upon a time story. How did you get into this whole parenting and entrepreneur gig? Which came first, the business or the kids?
Well, the business came first. I was running an accounting practice down in California at the time, going through some real bumpiness because we had just gone through a major earthquake that had leveled over half our town. So during that process, I ended up selling to another accountant and merging our offices together. And about that time, God blessed us with a surprise in that we were able to adopt a 23-month-old little girl.
Wow.
And totally out of the blue. I mean, we had been trying for years and nothing had ever come up. And then ta-da, here's a little girl. We found out about her on a Wednesday and got her on a Friday.
Oh my
It was that fast.
You asked and now you shall receive.
Right. And then all of a sudden now I was having to balance working 10-hour days, 5 days a week with a 2-year-old, instant 2-year-old.
Oh my.
And we all know how busy 2-year-olds are. I had never been a mom before. So it was a little bit of a learning curve.
I guess. Wow.
So from there, I had committed to staying with them for a couple years to help with the transition of me phasing out and him becoming the main accountant with my own clients. And so we started making plans to come home to Idaho, which is where we currently are now in northern Idaho. And at that point, I said, if I get to come home to Idaho, the cost of living is so much less up here. I want to work from home and get to be a mommy first, because this may be my only chance. And it turned out it was. She was my only daughter. And so for several years, I had the privilege of getting to work from home and working around her schedule and getting to be a mom and helping in her class at school and just all those fun things that I was hoping I would get to do.
Wow. So for 2 years. So how old was she when you got to start that?
She was 4. So for the first 2 years of her life, she was in daycare. Not the first 2 years we had her. Right. She was in daycare.
Right.
And that was so hard to finally have this greatest wish that I ever wanted was to be a mom, and then to have to drop her off at daycare. And it's like, there's got to be a better way. So we came home to Idaho. She was 4 years old. And so from the age of 4 to 10, she got to have me home with her and be there for her. And I did my business around her. So when she would take naps, I would hop in my office and work on something for a client. When she'd go to bed at night, I'd hop in my office and work on something for a client. And my business was very small back then, unlike what it is today. But it allowed me to get that solid foundation built with a little girl who had been passed from person to person to person the first 2 years of her life. Right. She had a lot of challenges because of her insecurities that came with just being passed. And she was afraid that we were going to give her away. Yeah. But she couldn't verbalize it when she was young.
Right.
And so we dealt with a lot of those kind of issues during those early years of building the fact that mom will be there. And if I drop you off somewhere, I will come back and pick you up.
Yeah. I mean, we can only imagine if we haven't gone through that, what that would feel like, and especially for a young person who, like you say, has no idea why they're feeling these feelings, and they're totally out of their control. They have never done anything to warrant someone abandoning them. To be able to try and verbalize that and work through those things. So it's so wonderful that you were able to structure your life around hers so that you could give her that solid foundation. How old is she now?
She is 26 now.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, no longer 2, that's for sure.
No, and now we have a 5-year-old grandson.
Oh, how fun. Oh, how fun. Okay, so all right, so you went from a practice and the earthquake and merging and completing that, and then to moving home and staying home and working on a few clients here and there, and that sounded very familiar. Very, very familiar. I did the same thing, but not with clients. I sold an e-commerce product, an actual product, but the same thing. I would create that product while they were taking naps or after they went to bed. And really, most of the time, I didn't go to bed till at least 1 or 2 in the morning because I was working. And so you have that practice, and you said it was small then. So what did you do after that?
Well, when she was 10, we had one of those little life-changing alterations that all of a sudden I became the single parent in the home and the sole provider. And so I had to move my business into town and rent an office and get out there and start beating the pavement and coming up with clients. And that was before the internet days, basically, to where it was get out there and knock on doors, which I'm kind of that. Well, I'm better now. But back then I was very shy, quiet, introverted, typical accountant. And to go out and knock on those doors was beyond painful. But I had to keep a roof over our head. I was down to half the income that we had before and 100% of the bills. So it was do or die. So you got out there and did it and started building the business and had a very solid business over the years. She grew up in my office. She grew up wondering why her friends didn't have a fax machine and copiers and color printers and hole punchers and binding machines and just all these things, well, how come I can't just fax this to my friend or whatever?
Oh my gosh.
It was so funny because she literally grew up in this office. In fact, when we purchased the office building that we're currently in, and did a complete remodel and renovation on it, I had them put in a shower in our bathroom because during tax season, she was down here with me till, bedtime, and I could get her in there and get her shower and get her hair washed and all that kind of stuff before we went home. So I didn't have to deal with that once we went home. So she really grew up in this office.
But that's such a benefit to a certain extent. I mean, she was able to see what you had to do. And see what the results were, see what had to happen to run a business and keep a family afloat.
Right. Yeah, she got to see me saving for various things that we wanted. We had little peanut butter jars around the house. And I would drop little bits of money in here and there. We were living pretty much at the poverty level back at that point. And, if I got birthday money or Christmas money, or if I was able to pull an extra $5 or $10 or $20 out of something, we'd drop it in one of the assigned jars. And, but it helped her see that you don't just snap your fingers and you get everything.
Right.
Sometimes you have to save for a long time to get what you need or what you want. And so she witnessed that in my life. Now, hopefully she still remembers those things now that she's out living her own life. Because I did hear her make a comment not too long that when she got her paycheck, she allocates a certain amount for food and for gas and for things like that. So she's thinking back to those jars or the envelopes or whatever I had going during that time period in our life.
Wow.
Where this is all we have. And when this envelope's empty, it's gone.
It's done.
Until we could get it replaced.
That's right.
And
wow.
So hopefully we built that foundation.
Yeah. And kudos to you. And obviously so many of us, Diane, it's so true that we usually call it the baby effect. So something happens usually when we have a baby, and you had that happen as well when you have a life-changing event like that, and you have to really restructure your life. And that's typically when a lot of us become entrepreneurs, because we want to we see things differently when that event happens, and we look for a better way, or basically our backs against the wall, and we really have no choice. We have to do this. And it sounds like you've had that happen twice now.
Actually,
at
three.
least. Yeah, I was going to say at least. And so you started, and did you do accounting and tax, or just tax, or what did you do for those first clients?
Back then, I just did the traditional accounting services. So bookkeeping, payroll, income tax preparation, just kind of the normal stuff you would expect from an accountant.
Yeah.
When we went through the recession back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, that time period, I found myself completely reinventing our business again.
Right.
And that is when I decided we needed to stand out from all the other accountants out there, and start developing a niche to work in. And that's when I started digging in and learning all about tax planning, so that today I'm happy to say I get to be a tax superhero.
So tell me more about that now. So after the recession, I get that as well. All of us kind of had to reinvent ourselves during that time frame. If you were in business at all, I'm sure you had to reinvent something. I certainly did. And so how did the superhero part come in? What did you change?
Well, first of all, as an accountant, we generally stink at marketing. The bar is so low with accountants that you don't even have to walk over it. I mean, it's just not even there. And I had to learn how to market, because I had never done any marketing. I was almost, the proverbial hang out your shingle and here they come.
Right.
For up to that point. Well, once that happened, I had to learn how to market and market to a different group than who we used to market to. We were very heavy in that blue-collar business owner type market before. Now we aim more towards professionals and their types of businesses, more the service businesses, that type of thing. We still have quite a few of the other clients, but we have more of the service type businesses now. In that reinventing of my business, I had to get over my fears of being out front. I really wanted to stay in the back, put my head down, make a pretty spreadsheet for you, and life was good before. Since then, I've become an author multiple times over. I think I've got 8 or 9, maybe 10 books out there now. I've had to learn how to do things like the interviews that we're doing today. Oh, the first couple scared me to death. I would hate to go back and listen to those first couple.
I know. Oh, let me tell you. Yeah,
hands were shaking.
I know. I did the same thing. You always hate your voice. You always hate the sound of your voice. You always think, I should have said that better, and I shouldn't have stumbled over that word. And that's right. All of us do that, no matter what.
Yeah, I've had to learn how to get in front of people and do seminars. Talk about painful. That was worse than interviews because they could see me. I've had to learn how to do webinars. I've had to learn how to put together a product and sell it on the internet. I've had to step way, way, way outside of what was my comfort zone back then to become what we call a tax coach. And what the difference between a tax coach and then your normal traditional accountant is, your traditional accountant is awesomely wonderful most of the time at recording history. They'll tell you what you did last month, last year, 2 years ago. They'll compare it to this year to last year. They'll give you all those numbers. They'll get all the right numbers put on the right forms. They'll get them filed on time. They'll keep you in compliance. They'll do all that wonderful stuff that has to be done, but usually they call it a day at that point. Where a tax coach, I can do all that nice, wonderful compliance stuff, but I like to sit down with people and have a conversation similar to what we're having today and just find out if they are potentially overpaying their taxes. In my dealings with people, almost all, not quite all, but probably 85-90% of the people I talk to are overpaying their taxes in one form or another, simply because they don't know what they don't know. And so we've taken the real educational stance and written all these books and do a lot of interviews and stuff to try to help educate people on some of the things that are deductible that they're just forgetting or they don't even know about. And then I like to offer them a free tax analysis where I'll take a look at their prior year's tax returns, and we'll either get on the phone or Skype or something, and we'll have a conversation about what I saw. It's really fun when I get to amend somebody's tax return and get them a big chunk of money coming back
Oh, yeah.
because their prior accountant missed something that was really obvious to outside eyes looking at it. It's like, well, how come you don't have this expense based on the conversation we just had? Things like that. And then sit down with them and create a plan for going forward so they can guarantee that they will have tax savings year after year after year after year. So I'm happy to say that to date we've saved over $1.5 million for our clients in income taxes.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yes, I understand exactly what you're talking about. I have the enormous pleasure and honor of having my tax accountant live with me. He's my husband. So I'm so lucky. I just look at him and say, okay, what should I do? And
you have a big advantage.
I so do. And but unfortunately on the other side of that, especially every tax season, because the majority of his business is tax, he does very few bookkeeping or not even bookkeeping, accounting work. Very few of his clients, he's pretty much whittled that out and it's been intentional. He prefers to focus on the taxes. And there are just I get to hear so many stories of people who come to him with issues. And unfortunately, many of them try and get way more than they should in deductions. Many business owners do. So, they hear something on the news or they hear some friend that said, oh yeah, my accountant told me that I can deduct 100% of my mortgage because I have an in-home office, right? Or I can deduct all of I just carry a mileage thing in my car and I buy the car through my business and then I can deduct all all that kind of stuff. And it's not true. Okay. The government might not be as smart as we would like, but they're definitely not stupid.
Right.
So,
yeah. I have a fairly new client who thinks he should be able to deduct his trips to Europe on vacation with his wife.
Yeah.
Because while he was there, he stopped in and saw a similar business in one of the countries that he was there. And it's like, no, sorry, not going to fly.
No. No, not unless
Nice
later.
try.
Yeah, not unless later you want to have to pay all that back.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice try.
Yeah. So, many times, how do you combat that? And I'm sure there are people in the audience who know exactly what we're talking about. They heard so-and-so say this, and they went to some conference, and this guy said he was being able to deduct this. And, many times we live in California. So many times, we live in an area that has many government employees, whether they're teachers or prison guards or, state workers or anything like that. And many of them come and say, well, so-and-so at work said I could do this. How do you combat that? And when you say an online business, you're still doing one-on-one coaching, it sounds like. And this is the part I try to get my husband to think about. Really, it sounds like it's a little more difficult beyond the book writing that you've talked about to be able to productize this because it's so individual.
Right. Yeah, my productizing has amounted to what I would call like an information product, which is basically me talking about ways that they can save money on their taxes. So we've got it kind of a little package. It's a CD, it's a transcript, it's some copies of my books, some things like that. So we've created this little product, but I use that more as a door opener than anything else. If I'm having a hard time reaching out to so-and-so, maybe who's a business coach or who's a very successful entrepreneur and they're not taking my calls or something, I will send them a package like that. So it becomes kind of a shock and awe package for them. Mm-hmm. And usually once they've received something to that effect from me, they will take my call or they will reach out to me. And
because of the value. Because of the value they see in it.
Yeah, you can open a door that way that you couldn't get open previously. And I've done that a lot with my books where I've sent different people a series of my books. And so over a course of a few months, they will have gotten 4 or 5 of my books. And by the time you're getting up to the 4th or the 5th book, they will they're starting to see a pattern here, that she knows what she's talking about. Maybe I need to have this conversation with her.
Okay, so I have to stop right there, Diane. Thank you so much for that, because power parents, and Diane, we call ourselves power parents because of exactly what you've experienced in your life with your daughter. If we've gotten a kid through potty training or school or any of the issues that they have to deal with and that we've had to deal with in raising a child and helping them navigate this world, we have so much power, really, because business is nothing compared to raising a kid, to me anyway. And so power parents, please, we have consumed so much of the sweet, delicious, wonderful online Kool-Aid that tells us just put up a lead magnet, okay, which is exactly what Diane's talking about, that entryway, that freebie, that gift that you're giving them, that door opener. Just put that up online and people will come. I really have to tell you, unless you already have a following, unless you already have an email list, a group of people that love what you have to say, that's not going to work to actually build a business on. You have to do the hard work of building relationships. And now Diane has just shown you a new way to look at that lead magnet, that door opener. You need outbound marketing, not just inbound, not just putting something up and waiting for people to come in and open that door themselves. You need to go put that door in front of a face and say, hey, knock on this door. I got something for you. Isn't that what you're talking about, Diane?
Yes, it is. And it's not uncommon for it to take many tries before you get that door open, especially if it's a fairly big door you're trying to open. That person's busy. They've got awesome gatekeepers, and you're a nobody. They've never heard of me. Right. I've heard of them, but they've never heard of me. Right. And I have got to open that door somehow. So in addition to using my books to open doors, we send out cards. I don't know if anybody's familiar with their brownie package. Mm-hmm. But we will usually send them a book or probably about 2 books, in a series. Then we'll send them a package of brownies, and then we'll send them another book. And by the time they get to that point, they're reaching out to me and saying, those brownies were so awesome. I'm thinking, well, what about my books?
Hey, you got to hit it where they love it.
Right. So that combination of the books and the brownies has opened up a lot of doors for me that I was not successful in getting to open previously.
And, that is so wonderful because, Diane, I mean, I'm sure this is not a shock to you and is not a surprise, but people usually don't love taxes as much as you do.
No, I'm
right?
No, I'm weird. I know that.
I know. So yeah, I don't think you're weird. I think you're awesome. Just like I think my husband's awesome. That's a total necessary thing. And I could never do what you do. But so if people think about this, power parents, think about it. Something as interesting to Diane as taxes is not as interesting to probably 95 at least % of the entrepreneurs out there, except for the fact that 100% of them are interested in taxes when they save money. They really don't like taxes when they have to pay money. So this is a negative to start with. So you're sweetening it up, right? You're sweetening it up by showing them, here's my book, here's some information, I know what I have to say, and now here's a little brownie for a little, sweetness to say, really, it's not as terrible as you might think. And I'm not as dry and uninteresting as some of the other tax people that you might have had dealings with in the past. So let's chat. What an amazing way to do it. So how do you determine who to send those things to?
That kind of depends. We have put together a list of names as I'm talking to current prospects and clients, and they drop somebody's name who then we start going out. We kind of do a little bit of snooping on the internet to see what they're like and, how successful are they. I'm looking for businesses who are in growth rate, who are making money. They're experiencing pain at tax time. It's painful to write those checks and make those big estimated payments. Those are the ones I love to work with because then we get to sit down with this plan. And a lot of times I can save them minimum of $5,000 a year, upward to hundreds of thousands of dollars a year One of the plans I did not too long ago saved him $385,000 in 1 year.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
and that's so cool to get to do that.
Oh my gosh, yes, that must make you feel so. No wonder you feel like a tax superhero.
Yes, I even have a purple cape to go with it.
Yay! Love that. So let me ask you this. All right. So Power Parents, I know you're taking some really good information from our conversation today, specifically about more of an outbound marketing rather than inbound. Instead of struggling with trying to put something up and it's not working and then try and find something else you should put up on the internet and it's not working. Let's start actually knocking on doors and go one by one by one. That's how I have built my current business messenger funnels. You know that if you've listened to this show. So do that. Believe me, I no longer drink the online Kool-Aid. Okay? I no longer do. And because I've opened doors, because I've built relationships, now people are coming to me and knocking on my door. So, but it's not like I've stopped building those relationships. I'm still doing both. I'm allowing people to come and knock on my door, and I'm still going out and finding doors and putting doors in front of people to ask them to knock on them and open them. So that's wonderful. Now, the next step is, let me ask you this, because you also have another hurdle to overcome, because most people out there in the businesses that you're talking about that have had success that you're talking about have accountants.
They do.
Or they have gone to some of the big, and I used to call them, I remember them as the big 8, and they were the big 6, and then there were whatever. So they're going to go
down to 4.
Yeah, right. So, they're going to have one of those large accounting firms that they deal with, or they're going to have some, internal person or something like that. How do you overcome that objection?
That's a huge one for me to overcome.
Yeah.
So I always start out with, just because you've reached out to me doesn't mean you have to lose your previous accountant.
Right.
Now, in full disclosure, probably 90% of the time, once we get through the process, they realize they've outgrown their current accountant. Right. But that's not at the beginning. That's right. At the end.
Right.
And so they reach out to me. We take a look at their tax returns. I set up the time to get on, like I said, either phone, Skype, Zoom, something like that with them. If they're out of the area, if they're local, then of course we'll set up an appointment for them to come into my office. But because I work nationwide, most of my calls are virtual.
Right.
And we'll just have that probably about a half an hour, maybe 45-minute conversation, and just find out what's going on in their business. What are your dreams, your goals, your desires? Where are you going with this business? Because sometimes I'm looking at the last 2 years' tax returns. Those numbers are obsolete from where they are today and where they're going tomorrow because they're in such high growth mode.
Right.
And so I want to know that before I start spouting off with, I think I can help you save this much money, or I think you are overpaying the government this much money. So our motto is, everybody needs to pay taxes, but you don't need to give them a big tip. And right. That's what most entrepreneurs are doing. They're giving the government thousands and thousands of dollars a year in a big tip that they don't need to give. And so we are not out there saying, don't pay taxes by any means. Mm-mm. We're saying, no, pay your fair share. I firmly believe we have to follow the IRS code. We have to pay our fair share. But boy, don't pay a penny more than you have to.
Yeah.
Learn this learn a little bit about this information so that to at least ask some questions.
Yeah, and so you probably have to. This isn't just like you're talking about with the traditional tax person or accountant, where basically the business just gives them all their information, gives them all their financial information, previous tax returns, and say, here you go, and they fill out the tax return. This is really proactive, and you really have to get into what their business goals are and what their trajectory is. Where is your marketing going? Where have you gone from the last 3 months? Where do you expect to be in the next 6 months? And be able to help plan based on that. So it's much more forward thinking, much more proactive than just recording history, like you said in the beginning.
You bet. And that to me is where the fun part of all this is.
Definitely.
Because if I get to sit down with you and we talk about where your business is heading and the amount of growth and stuff you've experienced this year and where you think you're going to be next year, then I can come along and create one of my beautiful spreadsheets that helps me see what that's going to do to you tax-wise, based on today's tax code. Now, we don't know what tomorrow's tax code will be, but based on today's tax code, I can tell you what, about how painful that's going to be, because sometimes I'm seeing people almost doubling in their profit from a couple years ago till now, as the economy's gotten healthier and their growth is happening. And that's starting to get scary to them when they look at the estimated payments that they're having to make. And so with some proper planning, sometimes we can have them skip some estimated payments or greatly reduce them. And I'll give you a little example. Years ago when I did a tax plan, it was for a machine shop. And he was overpaying his taxes. It was painful when I saw how much money he was overpaying his taxes by. And so we had this conversation, and he finally agreed to let me help him and do some planning for him. And he was kind of withdrawn, kind of quiet, like he really wasn't sure what was going on through this whole process. I sat down, I created this beautiful plan. We met with him. I implemented it for him because he wasn't comfortable doing it himself. And at the end of the year, when it was time to do his tax return, I found out he had continued making those estimated payments that his prior accountant told him to make. And so he had this big fat refund. And so I called him and I said, Scott, how would you feel if I told you you have a refund? He goes, yeah, right. He goes, I haven't had a refund in 30 years. How could I have a refund? And so that particular year, he had a refund between his state and federal. Oh, it's probably $40,000 or $50,000 worth.
Oh my goodness. And
so we rolled about half of it forward, which covered all of his estimated payments for the next year, and got him back a big chunk of cash. And he came into my office later and he says, Diane, he goes, I have to make a confession. He says, when you started in on all this, he thought, I'll just go along and let her do her thing, I'll just play along. And he says, I really didn't think you could do it. He says, I am amazed, and I just want to thank you because you really did it. Yeah. And with him, he has taken those tax savings over the years. He's bought a commercial building, and about 1 or 2 more years of tax savings, he will have paid for that his commercial building that now houses his business 100% from his tax savings, which is money he would have given to the government.
Oh my gosh, yes. How wonderful that is. I mean, it takes a very detailed, very sometimes dry topic and turns it into a pretty exciting opportunity.
Yes.
So I know what you're talking about. I started a new business just this last February, and it has pretty much exploded. And now my husband comes knocking on my door going, dear, we need to start making estimated payments. And I'm like, estimated what? What are you talking about? Why would I have to do that? Well, you need to do that. So I have on my calendar this Friday, I have to total everything because it's happened so fast. I have, systems in place, but they're all wonky. So I have to go through and go into expenses and income and all that kind of stuff and create give him the true numbers of everything that's happened. And so once I do that on Friday, then he's going to have to go do his magic to it and see how we need to maybe adjust things. Am I going to do a 1099 person? Am I going to do this person as an employee? Do all of that and planning all that out to determine what my estimated payments will be so that I don't have a huge tax bill at the end of the year. And I, of course, would have no clue anything about that. So Power Parents, as you go, these are things, and we haven't obviously talked about insurance. I have a very negative feeling about insurance, so I don't like even thinking about or talking about that. But taxes, this is a necessary part of life. So how would you feel, Power Parents, if you're out there and you have your business and it starts to do well, and then all of a sudden you're surprised at the end of the year to go, what? I owe what? And all that wonderful feeling you had about your business doing well just went down the tubes because of the fact that now you have a huge tax bill and there goes your profit. Whereas if you were to plan ahead a little bit and get in on this kind of idea and really looking forward to plan this, how much sweeter it would be to pay as little as possible. But definitely we have to pay our share, but pay as little as possible. Wow. Diane, that must be an amazing feeling, and your clients must absolutely love you.
They do. And it is an amazing feeling. And it's so rewarding compared to before when I would say, Mary Catherine, I've just finished your tax return. And by the way, you owe $40,000 to the IRS and you're
Oh my
gasping and
gosh.
you're dying and everything
Yes.
else. Now I get to tell you, Mary Catherine, hey, because of all the tax planning that we've done, we were able to save you $20,000 on this year's taxes.
Yeah.
And you're looking at me like, wow, that's really cool. Can we do that again next year?
Yes,
And I'm
I
like,
know.
sure we can.
Yeah, definitely. And that's,
Just-
so many things that come into this. And especially if we want to take the current political climate and the current laws that are on the books. And we look at Obamacare and we look at, now we can't talk about the tax planning changes that are being proposed until they actually are signed into law. But we can look at the current situation like Obamacare. And I know my husband has come home and just been so sad for some people that are his clients. And he's had to go do their tax returns, and they got into one of the exchanges and have major health issues, both a husband and wife. And they get to the end of their filing and come to find out they made too much money to be able to take advantage of those exchanges, so they have to pay it all back.
We call it the Unaffordable Care Act.
So do we, but we call it many more explicit names.
Yes, that's the nicest one.
Yes.
Because of that type of stuff. Or somebody who's self-employed and they based their numbers at the exchange on last year's tax return.
Right.
And then this year's comes in and here we go. It just kills them on their taxes when they have to pay that money back. Or somebody who really truly couldn't afford it and now this year has the big penalty because those penalties are continuing to grow on those tax returns. And you just look at what it does to families and from the tax standpoint. And I can't speak to anything other than the tax standpoint.
Right.
But I see what it does to people on their tax returns. And I see the tears that are shed in my office over what that has done to their tax return.
Yeah, and I can speak to it from personal experience. And specifically, that's the reason I refused to go into any of the exchange. If this, so basically I have the same exact healthcare plan. Actually, now both of my sons are covered for maternity. But anyway, that's beside the point. So I have the exact same healthcare plan, and you can't have catastrophic obviously. So it's like the bronze plan or whatever, but it's tripled in price.
Yes.
From before Obamacare, I only paid $500 a month for my family of four. For the exact same plan, now I pay $1,500 for my family of four. And when I complain about that, what I'm told is, well, that's what the exchange is for. And I tell them back, I'm sorry, I don't need the government to pay my taxes for or pay my insurance for me, because that comes with the wonderful little strings that we're talking about. So it's just, I agree with you. It's just so sad. So, when things like that happen, my husband has no problem looking the other way when some of his clients might come in and say, well, our income has changed. Right. To be able to not have to not lose their house when they have to pay $50,000 back.
Yeah, that's painful.
Yeah. So, not that he obviously does anything illegal by any stretch of the imagination, but he can only take the numbers that are given. Let's just say that.
Right.
But it is so sad. It really, really is. So having help like someone like you in our corner to be able to give us a heads up when things like this happen, to know all those facts. And that's all he says to his clients. Please come talk to me. Tell me what's happening in your life so that I may advise you and make sure we don't have these surprises at the end of the year or at the end of your taxes. Right. Wow. It's but power parents, most of us don't think about that, especially if you do your own taxes. And if you're one of those solo entrepreneurs who just does that all yourself, you may not know about these things, and it may come back and bite you quite hard. So I would suggest, if you're getting it all in that realm of wondering whether you're 400% over the poverty level and whether you even know what that is, I would suggest you talk to someone like Diane definitely make sure that you're not hurting yourself in the long run. Wow. Okay. So let me ask you this, Diane. What if you had one piece of advice you would give someone, or one tool that the entrepreneurs in our audience, and let me give you a quick rundown. We have solo entrepreneurs all the way to entrepreneurs that have teams and they're making 7 figures a year. So we have anyone from, say, 5 figures, mid 5 figures, say $50,000 a year, all the way up to millions. Majority of them, however, are in the high 5 to high 6 figures range.
Okay.
And they might have a small team of people. They might be either solo, or they might have maybe 1 or 2 assistants, or maybe, something like that level of person on their team. And let's look at systems, if you will. If there is one particular system or one piece of advice you would give them on systems that they can use to help their business or help their accountant or tax person, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, the system I was going to give you had nothing to do with helping their accountant or tax person.
Okay, well then give us that.
Okay. Well, and I'll speak to the first one first. I would say have some sort of way to keep track of your income and your expenses, whether you do something like QuickBooks or even an Excel spreadsheet. Something along those lines is so helpful for an accountant, as opposed to coming in with the bag or the box, because during tax season especially, they don't have time and they just won't do it. Mm-hmm. I know something like that comes in our office. It's an automatic extension, and we'll work on it after tax season.
Right.
Because there just isn't time. So, but to speak to the other side, one of the biggest tools that has helped me the most in my business is the concept of time blocking. And time blocking, for those who aren't familiar with that, means that I will make an appointment with myself on my calendar to work on such and such a project from this time to this time. And then maybe something else from this time to this time. And when that time is up, I have to stop and I move to what the next item is. And that helps me get through the day and keep my production up and not get sidetracked. It also keeps me from chasing rabbit trails, which, none of us would ever do that, but but it keeps you focused, because I know I've blocked off 2 hours to work on this project. And I'm going to do my darndest to get that project done in 2 hours. Right. And if I really can't, then I'm going to have to put it back on the calendar and come back to it. And so that concept has really, really helped in my office, because now we've set it up so that every person on my team, including my receptionist, can have what we call D&D time, or do not disturb time. Right. And so if they're working on a project, they just have to let the whole staff know in the morning, before they get rolling for the day, I need to be on D&D from this time to this time. And their calls get held, and nobody is to interrupt them, and they can get these projects done. Where when we're completely open and accessible to everybody all the time, then they don't get done because we have too many interruptions. And so that concept of time blocking really changed the way we do business.
That's fantastic. And Power Parents, you definitely heard that concept here before. Where you and I, Diane, are doing that today, at least on my calendar. Today is my day for podcast interviews. And that's all I do every Wednesday is podcast interviews. And one after the other. And I have that blocked off so that I can focus. I have notifications turned off. I don't take phone calls. I don't get interrupted. That's just the way my day goes on Wednesdays. And you've also heard that in relation to the concept of the Pomodoro timer, so that actually there's a way to find out how long a task will take you, especially if it's a repeated task, something that you do repeatedly. I know my husband can knock out a tax return in no time flat because he has it all on his software. So he actually just inputs it right there, client's right there, inputs it in the information unless there's something missing, and he's done. And all he has to do is then review it once it comes out of the printer or once it gets done with processing. But you can use the Pomodoro timer to time yourself and give yourself, say, half-hour blocks of time to get a project done, and find out how many half-an-hour blocks it takes to get that project done. Again, an example would be my podcast editing. So typically it takes about an hour and a half to edit a 1-hour podcast. and that we've done a Pomodoro timer to figure that out. So we know we block that amount of time to get that task done. So that's the only part I would add to it. And to your point, Diane, that is such an amazing tool. Power Parents, if you're not time blocking, I highly recommend you use the tools and the techniques that Diane has shared today. Diane, it has been an amazing pleasure. I really, really have enjoyed speaking with you and having you share with us how you help people and use your tax superhero powers to really help people have a healthier and happier outlook on taxes. Is that kind of how you see it?
You bet, yes. And it's just so much fun to be on the creative side of the taxes and planning for the future instead of on the bad news delivery side. We do offer basically free copies of several of my books. If you put those in your show notes or whatever, we just ask that people cover the shipping and handling of $4.99. And those are available on my website as well as that free tax analysis that we mentioned.
And give me the name or the URL of that website.
www.taxcoach4u.com, and it's the number 4.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. I very much have enjoyed our chat, and look forward to another 10 books, I think, probably, huh?
We'll see.
To get powered up for your day, just go to parententrepreneur.power.com and listen to any one of the over 100 episodes we've had so far with amazing entrepreneurs just like you. It might just help you feel like a grown-up again.